Hello, welcome to Framework. I am Al Schwartz. With me, as always, is John Bernard.
Hi, happy Berry Day.
Oh, and Merry Berry Day to you as well. We're talking about Barry, the just horribly titled HBO show that you and I both love, that ended its run after 4 seasons recently. It is such a singular show.
It's weird.
Such a unique style, so striking and everything, and then it's got this most banal title possible. That's a weird thing to harp on, I know, but I feel like it really does the show no justice. It should be some word that is more striking.
Something, yeah. There's definitely a better title for this show somewhere out there. They, I don't know. Is the show even really about Barry in the end?
It's not even that singularly focused on him as a title character. It's not Taxi Driver.
Yeah.
I mean, in some ways it very much is Taxi Driver, but it's not in terms of focus on him as a character. It's got an ensemble.
I would say there's at least 4 characters that got more play in season 4 than Barry.
Yep.
He's become a minor supporting character on his own show somehow. I mean, I imagine some of that is Bill Hader behind the director's chair for the entire season. Might have something to do with it, but it also kind of feels like they wrote themselves into a corner with Barry and not with the other characters. They had more to do with them.
Well, I mean, I think that is something that Bill Hader is conscious of. He's done a lot of interviews about it
Right.
this season that I haven't listened to.
Same.
But I have picked up the impression sort of secondhand that, he's more ambivalent about presenting Barry as a charming anti-hero. And he's sort of aware that Barry is not a character that has sort of the endless layers to peel back of a Tony Soprano or a Don Draper. Really, he's got 2 to 3 layers. And
we got there sometime in season 3. We got to the core of Barry.
Maybe even 2, who knows?
Yeah.
But it's also Barry's trying to find more layers to himself, and they aren't really there.
Yeah, that's about what he is doing this season. He's like, surely there's more to me. Nope. Which is, I mean, it's interesting as a character. I don't know if this is successful, this 4th season. I'm not sure I would even call it particularly good. I think it's probably the worst season, but I didn't mind it. I enjoyed watching it, and I was really taken by how weird and unpredictable this was. I had no idea what I was going to see week to week on Barry, and I was always pretty interested in what it was.
I think this is certainly, I think this is the weakest of the 4 seasons. Yeah. I also think it was excellent.
Yeah, I can't get with you on that. It's got a lot going on, though. I mean, I'm fascinated by it. I'm thinking about it a lot. So that's a success right there. The fact that Barry is so sidelined that the show seems to have lost interest in, I think that's an issue. I think that's worth something. I think that is a good explanation for why it happened. I
don't know. I'd say the weakest part of the season for me, I mean, the weakest part is the one episode was a time jump where he is front and center.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's the worst episode. But even that is sort of, it's about Sally, really, that episode. And just some of the grimmest shit that Barry's ever done. It feels like a very different show that week.
I mean, but it also feels kind of a piece. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I guess there were some pretty big leaps there. And weirdly, this is not the one that anybody focuses on. I think that some people had an issue with the time jump generally, and maybe Barry becoming born again, and the giant turn in Fuchs' character.
But Fuchs. We'll get to Fuchs.
To me, I think the part of the time jump that I bought the least might have been the Cousineau part of it.
They lost their way with Cousineau, I'm afraid. I don't know. Or maybe not. He has one of the most striking resolutions of the whole show. It's kind of mind blowing that he's punished more than anyone. I feel like, and it's earned in a way, but not. It's like the point is it's much worse than he deserves. But he did bring it on himself. We're getting ahead of ourselves a little there. There's things that I don't buy, just structurally, narratively, that happen in this season. There's moments that I'm just I'm surprised how careless that was. Barry's escape from Bunny Colvin's garage kind of just happens because Bunny got busy with other shit. I guess the character's not named Bunny. That's who he was on The Wire.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, but
he refocused on Kusuno for some reason.
Yeah, I mean,
like it almost seems like he bought that Kusuno was the mastermind all of a sudden.
well,
which
the breadcrumbs are there, the $250,000 payoff, and the way Barry is in general in interrogation. I mean, I think they did the groundwork. You can see the how the narrative was plotted, but it doesn't feel emotionally true. That's for sure. But I don't know what to fucking think of that character anyway. What is that? What's the character's name on Barry?
Jim Moss.
Jim Moss. Yeah, I found that every time he's on screen, I'm kind of uncomfortable and anxious, which I guess they're going for. But it's hard to track him as a character necessarily because he can kind of just do superpower shit, like make the Vanity Fair author speak German exclusively. Somehow, like shit like that. I'm just like, what world are we dealing with here? And this is the kind of stuff where I'm just sort of like, that's an odd choice. Why is that in this show? Why is that a plot line if it's going to resolve in that way?
That feels a piece with this world to me. I mean, and you're right, all the way to the end, I am kind of asking, what is this world exactly?
Yeah,
because it never settled into a full sense of reality here. Like the things, you're right. Sometimes it is stunningly realistic in how it depicts violence, and sometimes it is very fanciful in how Barry can escape, like getting out of a room in a maximum security prison, then translate to he's just disappeared into the city of Los Angeles, and that's, or getting out of the garage there. It's just highly convenient that Jim Moss, who's hyper competent and superhuman in some ways, still becomes careless enough to just leave a knife sitting next to him and have him tied to it loosely enough to a chair that he can move it across the room in 5 seconds.
Yeah. And I think that sort of elasticity between realistic and absurd, that extends to the psychological life of these characters too. Some of the insight this show has into its people, and I was reminded of The Sopranos, and just sort of it's this cynical, almost misanthropic kind of examination of how people can't change and how they will find ways to excuse their worst behavior forever. And then there's also just like massive leaps that'll happen for no good reason, but Fuchs does that a little. I mean, the Stephen Root kind of sells all that, but it's all over the map. And I mean, I think that's technically probably an issue, but I kind of it's so part of Barry's makeup and the way the show has always felt, and it part of what makes the show unique and such a kind of original, exciting thing to watch, that I don't think it's a problem exactly. I think it's part of the recipe. Yeah,
I don't know that technically applies to this. Because, and maybe if I go back and watch the first season, I'll feel differently. Maybe there was things were more grounded back then.
For sure they are.
But it's been so long now that I don't know, it feels to me like the show has been operating in less and less in the real world for so many years now. I guess because COVID stretched it out to that. The first 2 seasons seem like a long time ago, and the second 2 seem a lot more recent to me. But
for sure, and they're almost different shows.
Yeah, I suppose so. But I don't know. It feels. I guess also a question of what do you want out of it? Because I don't know that I ever wanted Barry to be a sort of Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul-esque process of, okay, this is a generally realistic world, and how are we going to navigate these criminal peccadillos in the most realistic way possible? Type of show.
Yeah, it has something like that going on. This final season, like structurally, had similarities to Better Call Saul's final season,
and Breaking Bad's,
which
the time jump.
It's actually very exactly right. And I mean, it's almost bad luck that came right after Better Call Saul, which is very similar kind of crime, drama, comedy, a lot of different things going on at once, a lot of the same plot elements occurring, and they kind of did it perfectly. Like the Better Call Saul final season is excellent, and this one is a little in its shadow. I think it's it's just a little sort of coincidentally similar, and I think the comparison hurts it a little. It's still very good, like still. And very interesting. Like, Better Call Saul felt sort of inevitable. None of this feels that way because it's just so like, oh shit, that's what Fuchs is now. Stuff like that happens, and it'll take you by surprise constantly. And I guess that's sort of what it has that sets it apart. At least so it seemed to me. I didn't know where the show would be week to week.
Yeah, it's definitely unpredictable in that way. And but there's different veins of unpredictability, and I think I'm most impressed by the Better Call Saul Breaking Bad version of it, which or like Game of Thrones. Like those were generally unpredictable shows that also had like very sort of strict narrative laws that they abided by and very complex plots that, because of the rules are so strict, there's a limited number of like ways you can configure the Rubik's Cube to have it still function. And they still manage to find ways that the audiences, at least, in their good times, to configure it in ways the audiences didn't anticipate, that I couldn't, even when we were obsessed with those shows and trying to puzzle it out. And then there's a version of unpredictable, which is something more like Mad Men, Atlanta, or whatever. It's like, I have no idea what the next episode of Atlanta is going to be. That's because there is no real continuity. And it could be a totally different show. There could be it's just the episodic thing. It's not a really tightly serialized, A to B to C narrative over the course of a season. And when you can make that tightly serialized narrative still surprising, that's really impressive to me. When you're just kind of all over the map, which Barry is more in this vein, I think, that
it's kind of both those things.
Yeah, Barry's a little bit of both is what I'm getting at here. It's somewhere in the meantime there, and that made it also. I was always interested in seeing what happened next, and continually taken aback by it, continually surprised. Not, I didn't love every single development exactly, but overall I liked that the season was taking these big chances. That the things I wanted, I didn't know what I wanted from the end game of Barry. That I didn't. It was like, I need to see this conflict resolved. Finally, I need to see this character die or whatever, or this character be redeemed. It was just like, I don't know. I want to see the show remain weird, funny, and mean. And for me, the fourth season did all those things. At its lowest points, there's 2 episodes, including the finale, that are not very funny, but definitely weird and mean.
I mean, comedy definitely took a backseat this season. There's certainly moments, but it had other things on its mind for sure. And I think comedy was very important to this show because this could be a very funny show. There's certainly sequences in every season of Barry that are like howlingly funny, and maybe a few less this time around. But there's also scenes that are like frightening. It's a really strange cocktail. Like I mean, I heard some chatter about this season in that it went too weird and too far in a way that the show never has. And I don't know. I don't think it ever came quite as up to as bizarre as NoHo Hank's escape from the David Lynch animal dungeon or whatever that was going on last year. That's one of the weirdest David Lynch things I've ever seen in any show. And there's moments kind of approaching that, but that's as weird as it gets, in my opinion. And a real example of like, I don't know what I'm going to see week to week here. So.
Yeah. Also, I think we're overselling a bit that, on a relative scale, we can say that the 4th season is the one that's not as funny, but there's still a half dozen things in the season that I had to pause the show because I was laughing so hard at. And most of them revolved around NoHo Hank. The Dave and Buster's pitch was just amazing, phenomenal comic set piece. Him just off screen drooling over the introduction of the mercenaries was one of the funniest like scenes I've ever seen. Just the line about how don't sell yourself short, Todd, that's still a shitload of coups is just one of the best lines I've ever heard.
6 Qs, more like 4.5.
Yeah. It's a shitload of coups. No, I mean, and because look, it has NoHo Hank, which is just a incredible singular comic creation that no other show I've never seen that character type really on another show. I don't know what to compare him to.
No, that could be a Twin Peaks character maybe, but there's no one specifically like that.
Yeah.
Like he's great, and it feels like a character that they didn't need to keep around, but wisely did. Like this guy clearly is hitting. Let's make sure he's central to the relationships in the story, in a way that it wouldn't have to be, but the show is much richer for it, because whenever it just shifts over to NoHo Hank as the protagonist, that's kind of the show at its best.
Well, it certainly felt that way in the latter seasons. I don't remember of particulars about what he was doing mostly in the first or second season, other than just being this oddly effusive, very online gangster.
He's actually the only character that I think I would say I like.
At a base level.
I kind of like all the characters, but he's the one I actually care about, I would say. Like, I kind of don't give a shit about what happens to any of these people because they're rotten and they deserve it. But NoHo Hank, despite being a killer, I always had affection for, and was worried about him sometimes.
I felt pity, I guess, sympathy for Sally,
maybe.
At times.
The show doesn't.
But NoHo Hank's the only one I would actually want to hang out with.
Yeah. I think they did a very good job with Sally, actually. I think it's
an incredible performance.
Did a very strong, like as far as, I think it was maybe a little of the Gillian, what's her name? The one from Community.
Jacobs.
Gillian Jacobs, that where they kind of lean into
just pummeling
her sort of off-puttingness and pummel her to make you like her, and it works. Yeah. Like they put her through the ringer, and they never excuse her. Like she's shitty the whole time too. Like everyone. That's the thing about the show. It feels like every single character feels like they're growing, and then they just have a regression.
Mm-hmm.
Then they just fail a test. Gene Cousineau over and over. Sally very much like when she tries to snake that role at the amazing. That's like, none of the lessons stick, and then she immediately runs back to Barry, even if her lifeline is sent to her. Like it's very cynical,
just showing her as such a terrible mother, like, and
Jesus,
and not. It's not like a Jessica Walter style bad, like funny bad mother or anything. It's just very banal, poor. Maternal instincts, like lack of
just consumed in bitterness and depression, and unable to conquer that for the sake of her child.
And yet one of the things the only things that made me laugh in that one episode is her putting the burnt grilled cheese down in front of him and saying, I worked really hard on that.
There's a lot of gallows humor in this, man. A lot of this is just the darkest comedy, and there's always a place for that, I feel like, and there's shows, Breaking Bad and Sopranos have funny moments, funny dark moments. This is actually like first and foremost dark comedy, right? Like, I don't know if this is first and foremost anything, but I would call this a comedy at the end of the day, just a pitch black.
I think like in terms of Emmy nominations too, or whatever, it sorts itself as a comedy.
Of course.
A lot of that I think just goes down to being a half hour. Traditionally gets sorted into the comedy bucket versus if you're an hour. I mean, this aired its finale on the same night as Succession, which is an hour-long show.
A hilarious drama.
Pretty much a comedy, but it definitely gets sorted into the drama category because it's an hour-long show on HBO on Sunday nights.
Ted Lasso, another show going on right now, or just finishing up, is started as a half-hour comedy and sort of morphed into an hour-long drama, much to its detriment. Like it became pretty bad by the end because it just changed entirely what show it was. And
I stopped after the second season.
I even like the second season. Third season's a disaster, man. I can't even. There's no other way to put it.
What you just said sounds fucking awful to me.
It's brutal.
Oh
it's
no,
brutal.
I don't want that. I don't want the more seriously it took itself, that show, the less I bought it.
It just stops being a comedy in season 3, man. It's just a. I don't want to talk about Ted Lasso. It blew it. But Barry did not. Very very. I don't know if it stuck landing, as I was saying, but it stayed interesting the full way through. And as a half-hour episode, absolutely painless. You know, you're never going to be upset at an episode of Barry because it was very rigid in how long it would be, and I really appreciated that as the season went on.
Yeah, it's not even a cheater where it's a half-hour time slot that frequently has episodes that are 39 and 41 minutes. Like, no, these I would turn on the HBO, whatever the app was called that week, and I would start the episode and see 26 minutes 30 seconds. Wow, that's great, actually. Even the finale, I'm queuing it up. It aired the same night as Succession. Succession finale is, I don't know, 89 minutes or something, like, because that's an hour-long show. It's a finale. Fine, you can do that. And for Bo and Barry, expecting it to be, 47 minutes, 52, what are we doing? No, 27. Regular size, regular length episode. Again, Barry's barely in it, feels like. But
that's discipline that I appreciate in this day and age. I think it's a problem with shows getting indulgent. I mean, we've often talked of Sons of Anarchy as the ultimate expression of this, but there's a lot of shows are just too goddamn long now. And that Barry never did that. Barry knew exactly how to modulate itself into half-hour episodes. Could it have benefited by stretching some things out a little? I don't know. I don't know if you would gain much from
this is a singular enough show that it's hard for me to prescribe what it would benefit from. Like, most of the prescriptions I could make would be in service of stretching it into a more comfortable, familiar rhythm of an anti-hero prestige drama season. But
that's not what anyone wants.
Definitely some people want that, and I like that. That's part of Barry's DNA. But what makes the show really good is how it rose against those currents.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say I would point out things that didn't work, like the Vanity Fair author getting brainwashed into speaking German. I don't think that entire thing worked at all. But to go in and like remove that, I don't know. They were trying something there, they were attempting a thing, and they went for it, and it didn't quite work. Fine, it's all stuff like that with Barry.
But I'm not going to let you take away from me the phenomenal, like, the business of Fred Melamed running around in the background throwing his computer into the pool. Well, he's
that was great.
To the guys, Guzno's talking to the guy's wife. It's just, God, Fred Melamed, what a national treasure.
That is the best use they got out of him. That is what complaint I had for the season is more Fred Melamed, please. Yeah. He's perfect for this world. He's always funny. Could have used more of him. He's wonderful.
Yeah, and there was still doing that. It's just, God, we talked about this in the last time we did Barry season 3, I think, but just it shoots action in this really striking way. It's stylized, but not really like sexy. And it's sort of like it locks into a particular perspective on an action scene, but it's not like really rigid first person perspective on it. Like, just think of the shot of Hank and his buddy firing the rocket at the house and missing.
That was the standout of this season for sure.
So good. And that camera like floats around like to follow him as they're chasing him down the mountain, and falls over, but it still kind of maintains that perspective of as if somebody is standing in that, like, right behind them in that. And it's a weirdly disciplined approach. It's very disciplined, but also a little whimsical in how it's constructed. And
very, it's
and
whimsy is a good word for a lot of the stuff in this show. The lengthy conversation about the Fast and the Furious series within
incredible
Fuchs's crew. Yeah. Like, they'll just take the time for stuff like that. And that is such a defining aspect of the show, is just the digressions and the whimsy of it. It's odd. I mean, I don't know. I guess I could imagine something like that on Righteous Gemstones, a show that has some similarities to
certainly.
Yeah. And so I guess it's not like completely unique that it's doing those sort of things, but it is appreciated and well executed. So, yeah.
Well, here's one takeaway I have from this is Bill Hader is probably a freaking genius. I think I really want to.
Oh yeah,
really want to see what's he going to do next. Like, what do you want from him next? Is it too easy to say horror movie?
I mean, he's been talking about a horror movie for like years. I feel like that is what I want to see him do. Like, I feel like he's got one in him. You know, like if he did like a movie with Ari Aster, I would be so goddamn excited. That would be perfect. He did. He's in Beau is Afraid. Actually.
No, he did. Okay.
Yeah.
What I mean is,
small role.
Where do I want to see Bill Hader on screen? I want to what do I want him to write and direct next? And I mean,
fair enough.
What, do you think his horror movie should be a slasher? Do you think that?
I mean, I wouldn't presume. I would be like, what's the thing you want to do, Hader? He did talk about wanting to do a slasher film. Like, his pitch was like a slasher film happening to like you and your friends, like real people dealing with the slasher, Shaun of the Dead type thing, and that sounds fine. You know, I don't know. That's a while ago. That was pre-Barry, so I almost feel like it would be something more ambitious now if he tried it. Like, you know, he's one of those guys that, you know, always seems to be kind of on the edge of horror. There's horror elements in Barry. That scene with Sally in the track house.
Oh yeah,
that's a horror scene.
That's a David Lynch horror sequence.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I guess, and I think there's a track record of common people going into horror, and we've talked about it works. Jordan Peele being the most obvious recent example of that. It's a good foray again, and also because horror can be done on the cheap. So for people that are a little tradacious, but I don't know. I mean, I kind of want to see him do a paranoid thriller, his like Invasion of the Body Snatchers type movie.
I think he'd nail it. I mean, I'm kind of at the point where I think he'd probably nail anything that he put his mind to. I don't want to see him do like, you know, studio work or go be in a Marvel movie or something like that. I want him to do Jordan Peele shit. I want him to do whatever he wants to do, and that I think is going to be the thing that'll be great.
I mean,
you know, the most control he gets. You know, I think that's the path.
I mean, if I have one takeaway from Barry, it's that I will be stunned if he went and took a Marvel movie. Like, it doesn't seem like at all where his interests lie.
Oh, it's an easy paycheck, but you know, yeah, he's at a point in his career where he doesn't have to.
Yeah,
you know, like he can kind of do something now if it's not too expensive and whatever he wants, I would think, which is a great place to be in. And it might just be another show on HBO. Whatever it is, you know, I would say as long as it's scaled, you know, budget wise, audience wise, to a place where he can control it and do what he wants. That's what I'm hoping for Bill Hader. He is a legitimate artistic voice at this point, and one of the most talented people to ever come out of SNL. I love him. He's great.
Yeah,
more of him. Mm-hmm. He also plays BB-8, if you recall.
He does. Wait, I thought it was.
Yeah, I don't know how that works, but he's BB-8.
Well, whatever. I mean, yeah, no, I could see him doing a Mandalorian guest spot, sure, but I don't see him making a Star Wars show like as a writer director or anything.
I would hope not. No, I don't know. I mean, what's so exciting and good about Barry is how it just defies any sort of expectation or classification, and so it's hard to kind of, you know, speculate as to what I want to see him do at this point.
Yeah, that's the thing, because I never would have picked Barry as a project for him. I mean, never would have thought coming out of SNL that crime show would be a milieu that he would excel at. And I think I have told you this before, but you give me the log line of this show about, it's a hitman who tries to go to acting class, and it sounds insufferable to me. It's like, this is your Sopranos riff, except it's, instead of being like steeped in a specific, you know, Italian American culture and you know, genuinely smart thing, takes on psychotherapy, it's Hollywood self-obsession. Your Hollywood person who thinks, well, what if, you know, it's almost as interesting as psychotherapy is my acting classes. And what if a hitman walked in to my acting class? I think it would go a little something like this. And I would hate that. But it's pretty vicious with the Hollywood satire. And
it feels really engaged and acidic and studied when it's doing Hollywood satire. Like that feels in a lot of ways the most grounded, because it really knows what it's talking about. You know, it has very specific targets, and it goes for them mercilessly.
Yeah, I mean, even that, I don't know if grounded is where, like, I think of the Vanessa Bayer bit that struck out to me as like, why are we were suddenly a Saturday Night Live sketch in the middle of the show?
Sure.
like that's not grounded exactly, but it is like kind of like you were saying earlier with that it's so merciless towards Sally and Kusino that
Hates
it
him. Yeah.
cuts them no slack as like the
Yeah.
victims here, and that's where I think it does remind me of Sopranos. Is that's a show that I guess I'm very sensitive to this thing of Hollywood people doing Hollywood satire and thinking that they're being very good sports about teasing themselves, but it's sort of inherently self-aggrandizing, and like, yeah, you're making a joke about how like there's a lot of idiots in these acting classes, but also you're kind of implicitly saying that, but also it's the most interesting setting that I could possibly think of. So we have to do that here. And The Sopranos really was absolutely ruthless about like even like the writer characters on that show with Christopher and JT Dolan especially, not glamorizing their artistic pretensions whatsoever and having them be incredible, like venal and dumb and self-centered on the same level as everybody else. And like I said, in this case, for as much as it pummels Sally and makes you feel sorry for her, it never tries to make her the hero of the show, or that she is like completely undeserving of, I mean, she is undeserving of some of the stuff that happens to her is so outlandish, but she never handles it, you know, she's with grace.
Or self-reflection, or, you know, like it's, she gets, I guess, a relatively good ending, a relatively happy ending, in some ways, I guess. I feel like you just kind of had to give somebody something positive at the end after all that shit. And she's as good a candidate as anyone. I mean, because
everybody else loses harder than her. Fuchs gets the best ending, actually, now that I think about it.
Yeah. Fuchs gets the best ending, which is like objectively the worst person on the show. Just an evil fucker, all the way through.
Up until the very last episode where he has a moment of selflessness.
Did you buy it? Did you buy that? I mean, Stephen Root can sell me anything.
Yeah,
that's one of my takeaways from this season. I don't know. His arc this season was actually a giant mess in a lot of ways.
Yeah, but it was still so funny.
But Root pulled it all off. Root sold every contrary thing. Like everything he does makes no sense on paper, but man, Root sells it
exactly. But you know what I love about that scene, that in that final shootout, Fuchs does the selfless thing. Sally's also there, and does she throw herself on top of her son? No, she runs down the stairs into a different room. It's in the background. Like I went back to look, like, where did she go even? And she just runs off the side as her son's in the middle of the shootout. And part of that's like, yeah, okay, I guess you kind of just have to. They don't draw attention to it, so maybe the thinking was more kind of like, well, we need this moment between Fuchs and the boy, and so we need to just kind of keep her out of frame. So don't have us think about that too much. But it's also in keeping of what we were saying about them making you feel bad for Sally, but never redeeming her.
Yeah, absolutely. And to do that to Fuchs, I mean, to use Fuchs in that way, is shocking. He's got about 4 different modes he's playing in over the course of this season, and yeah, none of it is particularly consistent with who he was, except, you know, I guess the shittiest versions of him. You know, the guy who tries to who does a hilariously bad job of trying to get Barry on tape in the first episode. That
was phenomenal.
That's the Fuchs we've always known. Yeah. But then he turns into like a benevolent protector of Barry, seemingly for no reason at all. Gets punished and tortured and beaten and
becomes the Raven,
humiliated,
the thing that he was
because he's protecting Barry. Then off screen during the 8 years decides he hates Barry and wants to torture him to death as he turns into the Raven. Which, my God, seeing Stephen Root show up in the tank top with the tats and selling it,
the tats and the lats,
give that guy an Emmy.
Wild.
Wow, that guy's amazing. I have a thing. Have you seen the Elvis film, the Tom Hanks Elvis movie?
No, and I will not.
No, it's not worth seeing. But I believe Tom Hanks, a derided performance. I think if Stephen Root had played that movie, he's nominated for an Oscar, and everyone likes that movie a lot more. I think that was the role for him, and they They blew it by giving it to Hanks. Oh, well.
I don't know if I can speak for everybody, but yeah, you could do that to me for sure. Like, I mean, there's very few roles that you could not slot Stephen Root into, and I wouldn't be like, yeah, that's probably better than whatever the alternative was.
Tom Hanks, though.
Even Tom Hanks,
he's excellent. Yeah. Well, it's a Stephen Root role.
Yeah, it's a Southern Fried Manager type, right? Like, come on. That's, that's a Stephen. I mean, there isn't a Stephen Root typecasting, but that's as close as you can get to it. You know, he should. Has he never played Jerry the King Lawler in any sort of?
I don't think so. That would be fun, though.
It feels like we should do a biopic of him just so that can happen. But
I'm ready for the big Root role. I think he needs it. He's earned it. You know, he's deserved a real shot. You know, not like a lead, but a major supporting role in something. It's time. You know, and maybe not. You know, maybe in a movie. You know, something where you can really, you know, give this guy the laudits that he deserves. He's incredible.
I mean, fine. If he doesn't get it though, it's like he's still had 4 careers worth of fantastic roles. He's great in everything. You know, was News Radio that role for him? I don't know. Now, but
or it was the guy from Office Space, Milton or whatever. Like that he was that guy, and Fuchs in season 4 of Barry is incredible.
And 20 years later,
can't say enough good things about it.
25 years later. Now, one thing I would say about Fuchs getting like the happy ending of everybody though is I guess that the through line there, like you're saying, because his arc doesn't really make sense. It seems haphazard, but because of that, he is the only one of these characters who is actually willing to change, like to a fault.
I've seen this float around. Yes. And that's definitely like, we can't really, I mean, we kind of have to look at the show through that lens because that is Barry's whole deal. Like once the show decides Barry is irredeemable, probably around end of season 2, season 3, his story becomes like, okay, this is a guy who refuses to change. Like no matter what, he will always find a way to continue to kill people. Like he will always find an excuse or a reason why it's virtuous. I mean, that is underlined heavily at the end of this show when he's becomes religious and he's just searching religious podcasts for
pro murder takes,
saying that murder is okay, which is hilarious. And so you kind of have to view every character through that lens. And that very much fits with NoHo Hank and with Cousineau. Sally, yes, but she still gets kind of a happy ending, which breaks it down a little bit for me. I don't know. I feel like it's trying to like force some sort of structure onto something that is very intentionally not that.
I don't want the box to be that strict and restrictive, that they all have to fit this mold precisely. But I do think it is something about the Barry character. Even right at the beginning, doing the acting class, the thing about acting is he was kind of desperate to change himself. So this is a way of becoming something different. But what we saw over the years is that he never really wants to change. What he's really kind of always digging towards is a reason why what he's already done is actually okay.
He doesn't want forgiveness. He wants to be told you were right all along.
Yeah,
maybe. I'm not even that.
If you were wrong, it wasn't your fault.
That.
You don't. Yeah. And I think maybe this is something, I don't know how intentional this was, but what I took away and kind of liking was how, if this is an intentional satirical point or not, but how his being a veteran made it kind of impossible in our society for him to be actually judged that harshly and to be actually told you need to change. That there's always this thing of people are totally willing to say, yeah, you murdered just 27 people, but you had a hard time over there. Yeah. Whatever it is, that's bad. And that even down to the very ending of the finale, that the Hollywood version can only cast Barry as the hero, because ultimately they don't know how to do it's the American Sniper treatment. We don't really know how to deal with an actually complicated, probably bad version of a military veteran. We're still sort of overcompensating for maybe having been too harsh on the grunts in Vietnam. And it also plays into, I think, that my sort of hatred of the Hollywood satire thing is the Hollywood movie casts Cousineau as the evil mastermind. And that's the sort of, self-aggrandizing thing, while yes, technically making him the villain, but also making the actor the ultimate sort of evil genius type. Is giving him too much credit.
Well,
I mean, it's giving Kusno way too much credit, obviously, is the joke.
yeah, well, poor Kusno. I really struggling with how they handled Kusno. I mean, I kind of love that he gets fucked so hard at the end. I mean, it's interesting because they like they sold me that he cared about his girlfriend and that he was on a righteous crusade to get to take Barry down. Like they that is true. Like he is not venal to the point where that stuff is not true. He is he's just defeated by his ego and his just sort of weakness that is apparently like indicative of people who are involved in Hollywood. You know, that is just sort of like a cultural disease for everyone in that industry, as per Barry. And
it feels a bit muddled too, because he comes back from Israel, wherever the fuck he's supposed to be in the 8 years, and
I didn't mention that really.
And like he does resist the like allure of the Hollywood pitch for like one meeting, and then the second one he does a total turnaround. I guess they mentioned the name Daniel Day-Lewis
because he's ultimately a piece of shit, and the show believes that. I mean, too bad, man. He ultimately sucks, and there's no getting around that. But man, they're brutal to him. He shoots his son, and then his son believes that he is the monster. That's
the
savage.
Really dark part. That's it doesn't even like to the point of not making a ton of sense. Like I'm not sure I buy how his son put those pieces together, but I do. I mean, look, I'm ultimately glad that Kusno didn't have a genuine whatever religious awakening and turn his life around. I kind of like that they had him revert to being a piece of shit, because I think he was
everyone does. Everyone does on Barry. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. God, speaking of, but in terms of set pieces that I had to pause just because I was laughing too hard, his version, well, one, the scavenger hunt that he made the Vanity Fair author go on, to the ultimate prize of him telling his story in the form of a one-man show. God damn it. It's so fucking funny.
He's loathsome too, is the thing. Like despite good qualities, whatever, there's always shit like that and self-importance and
I don't even know what his good qualities
extra
are.
layers of his own ego and bullshit. Yeah, well, his good qualities are just like that. He can be charming, that he can help people. I mean, something that look, I came from an acting background. I was an actor for about 7 years, and in education for acting for about as long. I know a lot of acting teachers. I've known a lot, and bitterness is something that kind of comes with the territory. I mean, it's sort of a big thing, and the solve to that can be self-importance. Any whiff of sort of acclaim or credit, that it's like smelling salts. It'll bring your life into a
no. It's like it's giving non-alcoholic champagne to Barney Gumble. But his redeeming qualities are that he's played by Henry Winkler, so we want to like him.
Yeah,
I don't know that he.
Yeah, it makes it hard. Yeah, and kudos to Winkler to making this guy just pathetic and going for it, and allowing him to have the resolution he does. Savage again, boy. And it's not a guy you feel bad for either. You're kind of just like, yeah, I'll fuck him, I guess.
Yeah. I was like, oh, he's serving life in prison. Yeah, he's pretty old anyway. Like, yeah. No. All right. Well, I think that's Barry, man. It was here for a while. Now it's gone. Short and sweet.
Yeah. I mean, not a special, like, all-timer maybe, but like a real interesting show. Not like other things. Pretty good, pretty fun, intriguing the whole way through. I'll revisit this in a few years' time, I suspect. I'll see how Barry holds up in 2027 or whatever.
I think it might have some sneaky staying power. I think that it might gather a bit more of a following as time goes on. I mean, nothing really does. Things live forever now on streaming until they're shelved for tax purposes. But and sometimes things get a second look. But it seems like the second looks, they come from things that were a big hit before streaming.
I wouldn't be surprised if Hader ends up with another show as good or better either.
Yes, precisely. Well, and I think that will then cause some retrospective look back, like, hey, you know, Barry was an underappreciated thing. I mean, I do think it's been the best show on TV when it's been on at stretches.
Well, it's been a rough year for TV, in my opinion.
Like 98% of the world the TV world is going to tell you it's Succession, but for my money, Barry was where it's at.
One quick thing before we go. This is something that I was trying to make something of, and I'm not quite sure it's there or intentional, but I did feel like that in this fourth season there was a lot of role swapping going on in ways I didn't quite understand or wasn't able to chart. Like specifically, I was noticing that Barry was looking like Fuchs for a lot of the show. Like, it seemed like they were making him out to look like Stephen Root as much as they could sometimes. Whereas the Fuchs character, of course, ends up taking on Gene Cousineau vibes, and then ultimately Gene Cousineau, as portrayed in the film at the end, is basically Fuchs.
Yeah, I guess he is.
Uh-huh. He's the devil on his shoulder who's manipulating him. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but even less of, I mean, Fuchs himself was sort of a comic character for those first couple of seasons, that he was kind of a dumb shit as well.
But an asshole, a big asshole.
Oh, yes, but totally the devil. I mean, but they give that, the Netflix version gives Cousineau, the villain, you know, British villain gravitas.
Were those actors somebody? I didn't recognize either of them. Were those supposed to be people we knew?
They didn't pop to me.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, they looked like people who were actors that have probably been in things, but
for sure.
I didn't know them from anything specific.
A little surprised they didn't get, you know, big star cameos, SNL friends, something like that. Get Steve Martin to play Cousineau in the film, something like, you know.
Martin Short would have been.
Oh, that would have been fun, yeah. Regardless. Yeah, I mean, it was making its point. It was making its series point at that point. You know,
you know, speaking of other Hollywood satires that I can't stomach and actually really love, I've been rewatching some of BoJack Horseman lately, and
wonderful show.
A gag in the beginning of that where the BoJack Horseman is playing Mr. Peanut Butter in a movie, and then there's a role of BoJack Horseman himself who they cast Wallace Shawn to play him in a movie with himself, and it's a tremendous gag on that show. Because of course they get Wallace Shawn to do the voice, but casting Wallace Shawn as Cousineau would have been pretty incredible too.
Oh, that's pretty good. Yeah, he could have actually played Cousineau pretty well.
Yeah,
yeah,
it could have been him entirely. Like,
well. Good show. I appreciated what it was doing. It's a weird one. And like I said, like, I don't think everything landed, but man, I love the swing. I love the attempt, and it was constantly interesting and constantly surprising and funny and dark and mean and yeah, just I wish more shows had this voice, and I also appreciated that not only did I not know where it was going, it felt like the show didn't know where it was going, which can be a problem, but it doesn't have to be. It can be something that grows organically and works, and you know, and you get some odd plot lines in there because of that. But it also makes for a singular viewing experience. You know, you're not shuttling right to the, you know, sort of a foregone conclusion finale, which you know, in retrospect, is what Breaking Bad does. You know, it's it has a blueprint that it sticks to. Barry did not do that. At least I don't think it did. It was a crazy blueprint if it did. Yeah.
Well, I think I had heard some chatter about Hader saying he always thought it was this number of seasons or whatever, and he thought about it in terms of, if you heard this story as a true crime podcast or something, even that, it's hard for me to imagine the podcast version of this last season.
Right. Yeah.
It's.
I mean, they're kind of playing with that, like the dramatic representation of crime. You know, sure. It's some of that's going on. Yeah.
Like I said, good show, weird, which I think tends to age well. You know, particularly when you're dealing in such a familiar anti-hero crime, the territory. And it would be worth it to watch it if it was just had NoHo Hank and everything else kind of sucked around it. It would still probably be worth watching just as a comedy.
But, he's MVP, right? Series MVP's got to be NoHo Hank. Got be. Yeah.
Got it.
All right. Well, that's Barry. Yeah. Gemstones coming later this month. That's the next half-hour weird crime comedy from HBO, or Max, as we're calling it now.
We're not. I'm sorry. You can do it if you want. I'm not going for that. I'm going to wait for the next change before I commit.
See
So
if that one sounds better. Yes.
Yeah. So I was going to be dead naming that app for a minute. All right.
Well said.
We got to go.
Yeah. Good day to you, sir. Okay. Thank you for listening. All
Bye.
right. Bye.
Oh, yeah. Give us a rating on the podcast app you're listening on us, too. Hit the stars.
Please do.
A couple of them.
Yes.